Welcome to the Deep Dive Book Club podcast. I'm Leo.
I'm Joel.
You can get a hold of us at deepdivebookclub@gmail.com.
Or on Instagram at Deep Dive Book Club.
All right, today's sponsor is going to be Otter Kingdom Chub Mackerel. I'd like to point out to you that I discovered this.
The Chubster.
Chub Mackerel. It's a smaller mackerel, so low mercury. And for anyone who has not listened to any of our episodes yet, here's a brief backstory of the podcast and what we do. As the name suggests, this podcast is centered on having long format discussions about books we have read or books that we are in the process of reading. We have an in-person book club of amazing people where we have some great discussions. We loved it so much that we wanted to do the podcast version of that. In our in-person book club, we dive into both fiction and nonfiction books, and we will do the same thing here on the podcast. We would love for you to join the conversation, so reach out to us and be a part of the discussion.
And today we'll be diving into Discworld, a product of Terry Pratchett, with a one-off unrelated to the rest of the series. Because in earnest, Terry Pratchett is one of my favorite authors, and it's one of the first books of his I've read.
We read this book in our in-person book club last year. When we're choosing books, we do it in a democratic way where everyone throws a suggestion in, and then we do some ranked ordered voting and choose the top 2, 3, 4, 5, depending on how far out we want to make our reading list, and go from there. This book was one of Joel's suggestions that he put up for multiple rounds of voting, and it finally got picked. It was a very entertaining book to read, and we had a lot of great discussions that came out of it. So, of course, we wanted it to be featured here on the podcast. Plus, it's a nice break from the previous book we covered on the podcast, a nonfiction book with a lot of details. And here we have a nice narrative to go over. A lot of fun. And like Joel said, don't let the fact that it is a spin-off from a sprawling series scare you away. It was the only book of Pratchett's that I read, and it's perfectly readable by itself.
Although it's not the best according to the Discworld community, it still holds great sentiment for me. And Terry Pratchett himself is a wonderful author. He is considered one of the best-selling authors in the UK in the 1990s for multiple years. All of his efforts, in fact, even got him knighted as an officer of the Order of the British Empire. So technically, he is Sir Terence David John Pratchett. Unfortunately, he developed early onset dementia in his life, and he died March 12th, 2015, at the age of 66. After his death, his assistant and longtime friend wrote on Pratchett's Twitter account, and this is in all caps, quote, "At last, Sir Pratchett, we must walk together. Terry took Death's arm and followed him through the doors and on to the black desert under the endless night. The end." End quote. I would like to note that the first part of it is in all caps because anyone that's read Pratchett's work, Death, the personified Death, talks in all caps. And I thought it was a beautiful closing to such a wonderful author. He had several last works remaining on his hard drive, which, according to what he talked about for when he died, he wanted all of them destroyed. Specifically, he wanted them destroyed with a steamroller. So his assistant did that at one of the conventions after his death. He got the steamroller, he got his hard drive that had all of the remaining works that were unfinished, and they were destroyed, never to be seen again. And although we will never have any more Discworld books, I still think that he had a great literary achievement. He got knighted, he had so many awards. There's even international conventions based on his fantasy world that he developed, along with all the collaborations he had with Neil Gaiman, his Discworld, and everything else. He was a truly celebrated author. And I wanted to pull up a fun little diagram, a map, so to speak, and I'm going to show it to Leo, and he's going to describe what he sees just to show how deep of a world Terry Pratchett has developed.
So what Joel has here in front of me is what seems to be a fan-made map that kind of lays out where all the novels in Discworld sit together, how they're interrelated. There's color coding that's going on. There's different lines here of novels and characters. I love stuff like this because there's other franchises that have a lot of fan-made supplemental items. The one that comes to mind is Steven Erickson's Malazan series, gigantic, sprawling series that also has a lot of really good fan-made supplemental material. And, if I were to ever get into the Discworld books more thoroughly, this would be immensely helpful. It's got, I see Industrial Revolution on here, science novels, Rincewind novels, which Joel tells me is a important character in the universe. I see death novels, and that's the personified death as a character that Joel tells me are some of the best novels in the series. There's Witches, Tiffany Acking. What is that?
It's just another character. That one, though, is for young readers, and it goes through it's part of the witchy portions of his world. But they're cute and geared more towards younger readers.
Oh, I see. They're color-coded for young adult. And there's starter novels, there's short stories. Yeah, this is good stuff. This is good stuff. And this gives you an idea of how much the fan community engages with his work. So thank you for sharing. So let's run through an overview of the book for listeners. Sound good?
That does sound good. I guess if you're going to read the book and you don't want us to tell you what the book is, you should skip the next 45 seconds to a minute. But otherwise, we're not going to spoil too many things. We just want to give a synopsis so that as we're going through the discussion, everyone knows kind of the same page that we're on for the novel.
True. Yes. If you are going to read the book, you might not want to listen to us give an overview of the story. So you have been warned. Spoilers coming up. So the novel takes place mostly in and near a land called Omnia. The story centers on a religious acolyte named Brother, his misadventures with his god, and plots he finds himself unwittingly embroiled in. The god's name is Ohm, and an Omnian is a term both for a citizen of the land and the term for a religious adherent to Ohm. And I will note that Omnia is O-M-N-I-A. Ohm is just O-M. And Brother is B-R-U-T-H-A, for those of you that like to picture the words you're hearing.
Sure. The great god Ohm tries to manifest himself once more in the world at the time of the 8th prophet. He finds himself in the body of a tortoise, stripped of his divine powers except for the ability to singe eyebrows with tiny lightning bolts. We will find that his form is connected to power, which for gods equates to the number of believers. In Omnia, he is serendipitously and humorously dropped by an eagle into the gardens of a temple, where Brother finds him and seems to be the only person who can hear Ohm's voice. Eventually, Brother, who has a photographic memory, accompanies Vorbis, who is the head of the Quisition, to work for him as his secretary on a diplomatic mission to another country called Ephebe. Ohm secretly travels with Brother because he is desperate to get his powers back. Brother might be the only true Ohm believer.
Despite Brother's amazing memory, he is illiterate and rarely thinks for himself. Throughout his journey, Brother frequently has his beliefs and worldviews challenged, and we see them slowly transform. Ohm in tortoise form doesn't act at all like how Brother thinks his god would act, and the tortoise often seems to be ignorant or surprised by the religious writings in his name. Brother's worldviews are also challenged by the philosophers he meets in Ephebe, as well as the sheer malevolence and deviousness of Vorbis.
Vorbis' evil plan to take over Ephebe, along with all the other nearby nation-states in the region, becomes apparent, and Brother realizes his own sense of justice, which turns out to be at odds sometimes with what the god Ohm would want, and is quite different from what the religious leaders are saying. In the aftermath, Brother becomes the 8th prophet, ending the Quisition's practice of torture and reforming the church to be more open-minded and humanitarian, with the Citadel becoming home to the largest non-magical library on the Discworld. Ohm also agrees to forsake the smiting of Ohmian citizens for at least 100 years.
At the end of the novel, 100 years to the day after Ohm's return to power, Brother dies peacefully. In the afterlife world, he finds the spirit of Vorbis, and Vorbis was never able to move on. And just like we see Brother act throughout the novel with his characteristic compassion and mercy, He takes pity on Vorbis and guides him to his final judgment. So with that, let's take a quick break and then jump into some deep dive discussions. Let's start off by talking about the nature of belief. Belief as a resource in this book. Super interesting concept.
Pratchett introduces the idea that gods gain power from the belief of their followers, as seen with Ohm's weakened state. Pratchett's concept here can be seen as belief as a resource and treats belief as having direct influence on the world, even though belief is intangible, invisible, and seemingly impossible to quantify.
Go ahead.
How does this concept of belief fueling divine power resonate with you?
So first thing that comes to mind for me is I like how direct Pratchett makes the belief as a resource for the gods. He makes it very clear that they are directly powered or not by how many believers they have and how hard they believe in the gods. And that's kind of borne out throughout the novel. Is that something for you who have read many more Discworld novels? Is that something that's consistent throughout the other novels?
We can see that throughout the Discworld with different gods having domains, or basically different domains and areas. Their power is directly correlated to the number of believers that they have, and we can see the practitioners will interchange religions very frequently throughout the world. This temple or that temple, sacrifices and so forth. Even in this book, we can see the sea goddess. I don't know if we even get the name of the sea goddess, but she has a particular power and ability, and then we see Ohm strike a deal with her.
Oh, yeah, I remember that part.
And she's like, well, I have to do certain actions so that my believers still fear me. And we can see that throughout the rest of the world, and usually humorous ways, because all of Pratchett's writing is all about humor. One of my memories of one of the books, I couldn't even tell you which book, is the academics who are magicians are like, yeah, we're going to do this, and we're not going to care about the gods. And then thunder starts rolling. They're like, well, except for this one. And then like the seas start crashing against the castle, so on and so forth, until they only list like two gods that are like the god of chickens that have lost their egg or something like that.
Yeah. There were scenes like that in this book, where people like say something atheistic and then there's thunder's crackling in the sky or something that's going on. They're like, oh yeah, and this god and this god and this god. Yeah.
Which is real fun because Pratchett himself was a devout atheist and not believing a sentient deity, but he had other beliefs of miracles and the connection of the universe. And so it's interesting, if he's such a devout atheist, how he intertwines so much religious narratives and plot points inside of all of his works.
Right. For someone who is an atheist, he does a really detailed job of laying out how the religions work, how the gods work. And like you said, the humor is all throughout. Everything is done kind of tongue in cheek, even if it's just like a slapstick scene or if it's a more serious emotional scene, there's humor like constantly. And is that also kind of normal for the series?
The constant humor?
Right.
I don't want to take away from his work if he did write anything serious, but I don't think I've ever read a single serious thing in his works that aren't inundated really with humor. That's not to say that he doesn't write about intense or important things. And maybe we're jumping ahead here, but for me, I see Pratchett as a person who uses humor to express his feelings and opinions much faster than serious facts.
Yeah, that's a good point. His writing kind of flows off the page, partially because of that humor. And that's not to say that he doesn't talk about heavy stuff, because in this book, there are some very heavy, dark things that happen at different story beats. But yeah, I noticed that there's humor every step of the way. Like almost every line, there's humor in there. And there's often times where I'd find myself laughing. I'm like, why am I laughing? This is a torture scene.
Right.
Okay, so back to belief. Can we think of some real world parallels where we see this? The first thing that kind of comes to mind for me is the way businesses work. Businesses are kind of run on belief, because everyone who worked at Coca-Cola 100 years ago is gone, but Coca-Cola as an entity still exists. It's an ongoing belief system. Companies are, in a way, like gods fueled on belief.
I guess that's a way to put it. The majority of our economic system is more or less a belief system. The value of our dollar is a belief system. The idea that we are going to have businesses next week are a belief system. In the same way that doomsday preppers are not believers, and some people would call them crazy. But for example, I don't have a stockpile of food in my house right now that can last for months because I believe that the grocery store down the street is still going to be providing me goods next week.
Well, I've got a giant stack of cans of chub mackerel in my pantry, so I'm good for when the apocalypse arrives.
At least you have the chubs. But the rest of the world, we can also see this belief as the strength inside of institutions, such as patriotism, right? The belief in a nation and the collective there. Same with religious institutions are almost too easy of a direct parallel, right? The more adherence you have, the more belief you have, the stronger you can make a movement. I mean, just look at the Crusades or the Jihads or anything like that.
Same thing in the other direction as far as size. Think about the cult. Like cults, you can almost see a direct parallel with how the tortoise god is. He's paranoid. He's doing whatever he can to survive just because he's only got a single true believer. And with cults, you see the same thing, that kind of doubling down and fervent belief because they are outsiders and not popular. Okay. Anything else you want to talk about here with belief as a resource and maybe other parallels?
I don't know that there's any other parallels. I almost feel like the parallels are too obvious to really dive into. But I do enjoy the manifestation inside of the narrative, the fact that the more believers you have, the more power you have. So he couldn't come back as a bull when he thought he was a bull. Instead, he could only manifest a tortoise. And then when he is used to calling down lightning bolts, he can just barely singe an eyebrow. That's the child screaming. Or was that the cat?
Cat. Another thing this topic makes me think of is it's almost like a magic system. Like when you're reading different fictional works that have magic in them, which I'm assuming other Discworld series has more explicit magic. Joel's nodding his head yes. So there's some works where the magic system is very explicit. Here's how it works, A to B to C. You do this, you can cast this spell. And then there's magic in different works where it's kind of strange and not directly explained, and maybe the perspective that we're getting as the reader is incomplete. The great example of that is Glenn Cook's Black Company series. It's written from first-person perspective from someone who's a non-magic user in a world with powerful wizards here and there throughout the world. And he doesn't know how, the narrator doesn't know how magic works, so he's just describing what he's seeing. And we never get a detailed explanation of like how the magic is working, how the crazy rituals that he sees are happening, or the mechanisms there, which I really enjoyed. I enjoyed that kind of sitting on the shoulder of someone who is bewildered, and I like that kind of exploration of magic. But I also like this very explicit explanation of the gods' ability to interact with the world and manifest with the world are just a 1-to-1 ratio of how much belief as a resource he can call upon. And that later on in the novel, Ohm goes and visits like the council of gods somewhere, and there's gods of various powers, and their power is directly based off of how many believers they command at the time. Very interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, let's talk about Brother's character and perspective. So Brother, he's a simple novice with a remarkable memory, and he also has unwavering faith. Although he's portrayed as being simple, it becomes obvious as the story develops that he has intellectual and character depth that may not be obvious at first glance. So when you were first going through this book, did you find any particular parts of his personality compelling that kind of jumped out to you?
I mean, besides his memory for everything, which is really unique in the way that his character is written, he was written to be, on the surface, a very plain person. I think the physical descriptors are like he's like a barrel that grew feet or something.
Yeah, something like that.
And there's not a lot to him, and each of the characters that interacts with him at the beginning of the novel consider him extremely simple, extremely slow, and that's just because of how docile he really is.
Right. Yeah, docile is kind of the right word for him, especially in the beginning of the book. He's gentle. He's a gentle person.
Gentle. Very caring. I mean, he overturns this tortoise, and then the tortoise wants to get fed. He feeds the tortoise, so on and so forth. So he's a docile, gentle, kind character.
I really like Brother as a protagonist because he is both kind-hearted and, in a way, simple. At the same time, he is very intellectually equipped. He's not only got the photographic memory, but he's got a lot of depth to him because he's presented with tricky situations and moral dilemmas, both from Ohm and the crazy evil stuff that Vorbis does. And each time, Brother rises to the occasion and oftentimes makes the harder choice in the face of, what Ohm's raging about or what Vorbis is doing, and stands up to, something that he feels is wrong. And it's harder for him coming from a place of being a little bit more passive and gentle or docile. So I really like watching that part of his character develop throughout the novel. He gets presented with these dilemmas, and every time he rises to the occasion in a believable way, in my opinion. So I think Pratchett did a really good job with writing his character.
Yeah, I think character development is really there. It's not unbelievable in the way that you see his personality traits at the beginning develop and become more apparent because of the difficult situations that he's put into, which change him as a person, which is, in my opinion, realistic.
Right. It's believable. You're right. The way he comes out on the other side of some of these dilemmas, especially in the face of the tortoise, being a lot more vengeful and vindictive possibly than the version of Ohm that has kind of been created out of the sacred writings of the religion.
And which I think here in a little bit we'll get into that, which I think is a key factor for understanding both Brother's mentality, but also I think Pratchett's largest critique of religious institutions inside of this book.
Right. Yeah, I do like that aspect of it as well. I think the only other thing I want to cover about Brother as a character is his perspective as an outsider. And we had some good discussions on this. He is, in many ways, an outsider to the organizations and groups that he finds himself in. Everything from his physical appearance, which we'll talk a little bit more about later. Like you said, he's described as a barrel that grew feet that were too big or something like that. He's not pretty to look at. He speaks kind of slowly. And if you read the novel, you'll see that part of that is just from how his grandmother treated him. He is extremely faithful to his religion, which is also interesting to watch interact with the contradiction between the manifestation of his God and the God in the writings. But everything has him as an outsider. He's at the bottom of the totem pole in the religious organization he's in. He's not a good-looking guy. He's not a well-spoken guy, at least in the beginning. He has to have a constant battle of will with Ohm. Ohm's like, I want to do this. We need to go be vengeful on this person. You need to go, do this for me. And if Brother feels like it's wrong, he's got to sit there and struggle with that. In the end, we see he becomes the eighth prophet, and he is a key figure to the religion and the land. But he doesn't start out that way. And the way he views things, same thing with his memory, with his photographic memory. He remembers every day of his life, every moment of his life, down to the last detail. And that is, again, something outside of normal experience. So his view, it's just very fun to look at the situations he encounters over his shoulder to see, okay, this is someone who's not an insider. Vorbis is very much an insider. He's got the position in the hierarchy. He commands a lot of followers. He's got all the power, and he, gets really close to being the leader of the religion, trying to get himself named as the prophet and trying to control how Ohm manifests himself. And you just see Brother coming in from the outside, which I like it. I like watching that perspective.
I don't know that I would use the term outsider, but I see what you're saying in his perspective.
Right. Outsider from a social perspective. Not really
more like an outcast?
Yeah, kind of like an outcast. A little bit of an outcast.
Outcast makes sense to me, but he's still inside the church.
Right. He's inside the church. Outcast would probably be a better term.
Yeah. I would say that's probably what I see. I'll say for this, the protagonist is not the type of protagonist that you see yourself in, though, because like you said, he is unique and he's outside the normal bounds of what a human would be.
That's true. That's true. He is likable, but you're right. As a reader, it'd be very difficult to relate to his experience directly. That's a good point. All right. That's all the thoughts I had on his character. You have anything else that you want to talk about? All right. How about now we talk about Ohm's fall from grace itself? So we kind of find out as we're reading the book that Ohm was once a powerful god, but now he's somehow trapped in the form of a little tortoise with very little ability to influence the world and people around him. He's got a lot of frustration because of his vulnerability, and that frustration coupled with his vulnerability is one of the main mechanisms that Pratchett uses to have a lot of humor pop up, and gives us a lot of depth to see various aspects of Ohm and the characters he encounters. So I really like that Pratchett uses that as a platform, and it's also a great platform not only for humor, but also for philosophy. So from your perspective, what did you think of Ohm's impotent rage and frustration?
The whole thing is just set up to be humorous, and perhaps some people would consider it dry humor. I do not. I consider it as wet as you can get, because there's so many times where you see him tell Brother, he's like, oh, I just have a tortoise brain, even though I'm like this god. And so as he's like growing in power, or he's like, oh, okay, we're going to get all of my followers back. And then once I'm, a big god, I'm going to make sure lettuce is a sacred plant now.
Oh, yeah. I remember that. Doesn't he also say something about eagles?
Yeah, he's going to, ban all eagles from the religion. Tortoises are going to become a sacred animal, so on and so forth. And we also see that as he's going through the people in the church, because of course none of them are real believers, Pratchett has almost like a formula for humor in this capacity, because we'll see people say, oh, there's good eating on a tortoise.
Oh, right.
In different parts of it. And so he has constant callback for collecting jokes that he's said before, and he has like a really good structure of continuing joke after joke.
I wonder if that's just part of Pratchett's personality.
I would like to imagine he was a very funny guy.
He was British.
And the rage and frustration, I think, can be felt on a human level, right? What child doesn't feel rage and frustration because they can't achieve what they want to achieve, right?
Yeah, Ohm in his tortoise form is very much the poster child for the impotent rage of like a toddler who can't get what they want.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially when he's used to getting what he wants. And he's used to being able to call down lightning bolts, and now he can't. And he is so used to cursing people that it leads to him saying extremely humorous curses.
You want to tell the listener one of your favorite
my favorite
curses?
One, and this isn't a direct quote, it's just what I remember, but he's like, may your genitals fall off, sprout wings, and fly away.
Yeah, I remember that.
And that stuck with me this whole time.
I mean, if someone screamed that at you, even if it was someone who was impotent and, toddler in their ability to influence the world around them, but they screamed that at you, you wouldn't forget it.
So in this world, like we talked about, the number of believers is equated to the amount of power that you have as a deity. So he's used to being very powerful with many followers. He has a whole nation that is supposed to be his follower. And he should be able to manifest as anything he wants, but because he's lacking that, he ends up only being a tortoise, not being a bull that people are used to, or a giant eagle, or anything like that.
Right. It's revealed as we're going through the novel that Ohm has manifested in various forms, like you said, a bull, an eagle. Do you think there is something to the fact that he is in the tortoise form that is a reflection of Omnia or the Omnians?
No, not necessarily. We do see a resistance movement inside of the church itself, which falls deeper into a subplot. And I think that's one of the things I enjoy about Pratchett's writing is there's like multiple subplots within each book that carries over into the other subplots of other books. In this case, it's the Le Tortile Mobile movement, which is just the turtle moves. And part of Pratchett's humor is in the Discworld. The whole world is sitting on a disc that is held up by 4 elephants that are standing on the back of a turtle, I believe.
Yeah, I've seen images of that.
And there's like nuance, or there's underground believers that believe that, but the main religion is like, no, we're a sphere world, right?
Right. Discworld is kind of flip-flop for the real world, whereas people used to insist that the world was flat, but the truth was it was a sphere, and it took us a while to figure that out. Some people still don't understand that. And in Discworld, it's the opposite. The backwards thinking is that the world is spherical, but in reality, it is flat and ultimately resting on the back of a turtle. Importantly, a turtle and not a tortoise. It's very, very important that Ohm is a tortoise and is not necessarily a turtle.
So there could be some connection there, but I don't know enough to bring it out.
What I think is interesting in Ohm's fall from grace and the humorous situation he finds himself in is the contrast between how powerful the religious organization is. And again, this is my only experience with Discworld, this particular novel. But the religious organization is very powerful. It's got a lot of adherents. But when Ohm shows up, we get more and more evidence that he really only has one true believer. Only Brother seems to be able to hear Ohm's voice and actually have an interaction with him. There's all this religious activity going on around him. There's all this praying. There's so much energy going into this religion, but somehow, over who knows how long, the religion has diverged so much from Ohm that he only has one believer anymore. And that's why he's showing up in the pitiful form that he's in. So that's something that's very interesting. And for Pratchett, being an atheist and someone who is kind of making a commentary on religious organizations, you could see the commentary there. Like, it's almost like he's pointing out, okay, how much is the current version of a popular religion actually matching up with the founder of the religion's intentions or the way that person had their message? So I enjoyed that.
Yeah, absolutely. A scathing remark, I think, by Pratchett in a truly humorous package.
Okay, anything else that you want to talk about with Ohm's fall from grace and his pitiful form that he finds himself in?
No.
All right, let's talk about amnesia. Pratchett creates a poignant juxtaposition between Brother's perfect knowledge of scriptures and Ohm's almost complete unfamiliarity. For example, in response to Brother discussing an important prophet in the church's history, Ohm will usually say something to the effect of, "Never met him." Or in response to Brother citing a scriptural dictate from Ohm will respond and say, "Did I really say that?" Or he'll say something like, "I don't remember that at all." So what is going on here, Joel? What do you think?
I don't think it's amnesia or uncaring at all. I think instead it is people converting what Ohm did or what Ohm said to fit the narrative that they wish to report. And I think that it's Pratchett's critiquing of people utilizing a religious backing as a platform to push a false narrative or false belief.
So it's not necessarily that Ohm is forgetting. You think someone has received the messages of Ohm and spun them into what they wanted it to say.
Which is why there's no Omian believers except for Brother, who is not a part of the higher management of church, who is not a part of the current transition to wanting a certain order for the Omian nation state.
That's a good point. And that's one thing that Ohm's upset about when he realizes Brother is the only person that can hear him. He's like, wait a minute. You're not the head of the religion? How come I can't talk to the head of the religion? I don't remember the title for the guy who's in charge of the Omnian religion, but the Pope, the version of the Pope for the Omnians. He's upset that the one person that can hear him is not
the lowest follower.
Right, is not at the top of the hierarchy.
So I don't think it's amnesia or uncaring at all. I think it's Pratchett's critique on institutional religions having a message completely different than what the divine power's message is.
Sometimes, though, it came off to me that Ohm did interact with some of these figures, like the previous prophets that are cited in the religious scriptures, and he just forgot something that he said just because he didn't care that much, and he was just saying something to say something. At least that's the impression I got, and that was never explicit one way or the other in the novel. But that's an impression I came away with.
I could see that coming across, especially when he gets to the city of Ephebe, which is more or less an ancient Greek city, right? Like in all the culture and all the writings and the philosophers, all of that, it's just an ancient Greek city. And in that case, we do see gods having a nonchalant caring of what they say or what happened, because they are angry in a moment and say something and then completely forget about it.
True. There's a random penguin in the pantheon of the Ephebians. I don't remember why. Why was there a penguin?
The penguin is the representation of the goddess of wisdom.
And do we remember why?
I don't think it's explained in the book. I think the wisdom is just that there is a penguin.
Okay. Only other thing I wanted to talk about here with kind of the mismatch between the current present state of the religion and the scriptures juxtaposed against the contrast of Ohm being completely different from how he's supposed to be manifesting, and his complete unfamiliarity with the current state of the scriptures and tenets. This has happened over the course of, centuries or a century in the world, of how long it's been since he had a direct interaction with his followers. But they're still listening to him this whole time. In a way, they're listening to the writings and the scriptures the way they are for a long amount of time, at least a century. Do you think this is similar to people who have parasocial relationships? And a parasocial relationship is simply like someone feels that they have a genuine relationship with someone that they don't actually have a interactive relationship with. An example would be a character in a TV show or a podcast, for example. If you listen to the same podcast host over and over and over again for hours and hours, you feel like you know them, but you really don't know them, and you don't have a back and forth, and they don't know anything about you, and you asymmetrically know a lot more about them. Do you feel there's some similarities there?
I didn't think or feel that way when I read the book.
Okay.
Did you feel that way? Did you see a parasocial
Sometimes I saw that.
interaction?
Yeah, sometimes that parallel kind of jumped out to me because of that, because of it seemed like the followers were deeply interacting with whatever bits of Ohm and his manifestations and scriptures they had, and they just had this ongoing dialogue with it that wasn't really a dialogue. And Ohm shows up and they've gone, way off over here, whereas Ohm's still Ohm. That was just my impression.
Yeah, sure. There's no wrong interpretation here.
True. Not a wrong interpretation, unless you think the Discworld is actually spherical. Okay. Would you like to talk about the humor and tone a little bit more in the novel?
Sure, we can do that. The whole novel is just humor and wit.
Were there any particular examples you wanted to highlight?
I'm often impressed because Pratchett has really great one-liners, and in some of his books, it is just one-liner after one-liner after one-liner. In this book, we didn't see that as much. I think he was still developing his literary prowess because this is only the 7th of 41 Discworld novels, and the middle sets of novels are some of the biggest. Okay. All right. I didn't know if you were going to take that call or not. I mean, that's fine. And so in this case, he didn't have as many one-liner after one-liner, but some of them were fun, and just his writing style was beautiful. For example, quote, "Bees loafed around in the bean blossoms, but buzzed fast in order to give the impression of hard work," end quote.
So again, it's interesting to have this conversation with you because you have a lot more familiarity with the Discworld, and I do not. So it's interesting that you say that the one-liners get a lot better in some of his other works, because that's one thing that really impressed me with the work itself is the one-liners were really strong. They were they were really good. One of the ones that there's so many, but one of the ones I wrote down here to use as an example was, quote, "Guilt was the grease in which the wheels of authority turned." Just a one-off sentence, super well written, flows, and it's just, for my experience in this novel, it's just over and over and over again. You just see a flash of really good wit and really good literary instincts from Pratchett.
Reminded me a lot of Mark Twain's writings or Mark Twain quotes, because Mark Twain has such a great way of painting with words that sometimes is unparalleled.
That's a good comparison. Another one on there was, "Gods don't like people doing much work. People who aren't busy all the time might start to think."
I think you missed a knot in there.
You're right. "Gods don't like people not doing much work. People who aren't busy all the time might start to think." Just straightforward, simple, but well done.
Inside of the book, like you said earlier, I'm impressed that even in the torture scene, or maybe that's a British thing, because I feel like we see Monty Python or other styles of British cinematography showing torture scenes in an extremely humorous manner.
You know, that's a good point. I didn't even think about that this could be a particular British manifestation, because, yeah, now I see the parallels with the way kind of Monty Python humor comes out.
Yeah, extraordinarily dark topics in a, like, overly, completely flamboyant, humorous manner.
Right. I did appreciate that. Normally I don't like that kind of setup or humor, but it's so well done in this novel. The levity does not take away from the heaviness of the subject at hand, like in a torture scene, and vice versa. They're paired well together, which I think can be easy to mess up or do in a tacky way. And to me, it didn't come off as tacky in this book.
Yeah.
Is that something you see in other Discworld books?
I don't find any of the books tacky, but again, I mean, he's one of my favorite authors. So
yeah, I didn't mean that. I meant so much, do you see similar pairings of heavy with levity done in a really good way?
Yes, especially with character development. And one of the things I like about his writings, as opposed to other authors' writings, is his characters age. And so you see the characters of like a young person starting their career and say the city guards or the city watch, and see his progression through his career through multiple different both subplots inside of certain books and main plots of other books, and be a completely different person. So in that regard, I do see a lot of dark topics or heavy topics, or how do you even make sense of this sometimes overbearing world and grapple with the fear of death in beautiful ways. And so I think he does a great job of capturing the meaning of life inside of it.
It reminds me of that Oscar Wilde quote that life's too important to take seriously. That seems to be suffused throughout. That attitude seems to be suffused throughout the novel. And it sounds like that's just part and parcel for the series as a whole.
Yeah. Life can be dark and heavy, so gotta laugh.
All right, let's take a quick break and jump right back in. Okay, we are back. Joel, let's talk about listening and being heard. Mm-hmm. I think another interesting aspect to look at the dynamics between Ohm and Brother is that brother, and we didn't talk about this necessarily when we were talking about his character, but something that gets pointed out repeatedly is that brother seems to be someone who really and truly listens. And so much so that other characters kind of react in a way that like they're a little disturbed by how much he's actually listening to him, or how much brother is listening to them, to the depth he is paying attention. And that just seems to be part of the sincere personality that brother has. And it's something that I really like that Pratchett put that in there. And I kind of wanted us to talk about that. Is the example I'm thinking of is the guy who's in charge of the acolytes that brother directly reports to. We get kind of an inside narration from him. And one of the things that he's thinking is like that it bothers him just how intensely brother listens. And this is someone who's in like a teacher role, who's dealing with acolytes and is in a role that, you know, he's expecting the acolytes to listen to him and learn from him and listen to his orders. But it's just interesting that in this particular situation, he is kind of bothered. Like, why is this kid listening so much? It's like if you were teaching a classroom full of kids, you expect a certain amount of listening, but you expect them not to like really pay that much attention.
Right. He is unnerved by the listening.
Unnerved's the right word, yeah.
And I don't think it's this book, but maybe another book in the city of Ephebes where all of the philosophers are. There is someone that listens to the main character. It might have been this book, but listens to the main character, and the main character is like, wow, you listened. That's so surprising. And then he slips him a bill. He's like, yep, I'm a professional listener. In a city of philosophers, I'm a professional listener, so people pay me for my services. And so we see multiple times Pratchett pointing out that humans in general are bad at listening. And so when someone truly does listen, in this case, it unnerves the leader of the acolyte.
And for me, this might be my conspiratorial mind at work here, but to me it's interesting that the only character in the novel who has such deep and true listening abilities is also the only person that can hear Ohm's voice. For me, there's a connection there. For you, what do you think?
I don't think that's necessarily a direct connection, because I think other people aren't true believers, and that's why they don't hear Ohm. And I think later in the book, when people see Ohm's physical manifestation and brothers bringing to bear the eighth prophet's commandments, people start to recognize and see Ohm for who he is, and he gains more power because he gets more believers at that time and more people can hear him. So I like your conspiratorial mindset here. I just think in the context of the narrative, it's not that people aren't listening, it's that people don't believe.
Right, that makes sense. It's also just exciting to see the connection there, that the one person that can hear him is the one person in the novel we see who really, truly listens to people.
Sure. I can tell you it's easy to not feel like people are listening, but then when you recognize someone is truly listening, it can be unnerving. I remember distinctly one of my really good friends and colleagues, Rob Speeden, who has done podcasts with me before. He's a person that I admire because he truly listens. Like whatever you're saying, he will absolutely truly listen, and sometimes his attention can be unnerving because you're like, oh, everything I say is important. Because oftentimes in passing conversations, we're not worried about the words we say because we felt like they're half listened to anyway. So when someone does do that, it's really apparent to me now if someone is truly listening, and it can be unnerving.
Right. We want people to listen to us, but only to a certain degree.
I mean, isn't that how it goes?
What'd you just say? Kidding. So anything else that you kind of want to talk about here in relation to listening and being heard? To me, that's a theme that jumped out to me in the book, especially in the beginning parts of the book. And there's something about the connection between brother's sincerity and the degree to which he'll listen to somebody.
No, nothing else I want to talk about. I mean, it's nice that you pointed that out because maybe there is something there, but that's not what I saw when I read.
Okay, got it. All right, next topic. Let's talk about two of the main characters and the way they are portrayed together. and we are talking about Vorbis and Brother. So as someone progresses through the book, you can see that Vorbis looms larger and more powerful in Brother's life. Vorbis starts off as kind of a distant figure. He's way up high in the hierarchy from Brother. He is in a different department, the Quisition. But as the events of the novel unfold, we see Vorbis, his presence kind of exerts a sort of gravity on Brother that pulls at him relentlessly, and his ideas of morals and what it means to be an Omnian get called into question because Vorbis is irrepressible as a presence in Brother's life, at least during the time of the novel. Vorbis seems to reach his highest point of power and menace when he unleashes his plot to take over Ephebe, and he sits in the tyrant's chair. All this is inverted when Brother and Vorbis wash up on a desert beach later on. Brother decides to carry Vorbis back to Omnia with him, even though is screaming at him to leave Vorbis behind, and that him carrying Vorbis would make it harder for him to survive trekking across the desert back to Omnia. What do you think this is saying? What do you think Pratchett is saying here with this kind of interaction and the actions that Brother takes in relation to Vorbis?
I thought it was Brother just being a good person who is himself. He is the follower of the best parts of the Omian religion. So in him being merciful and being gracious is him being who he is.
This is also the first instance of Brother directly defying
Besides the times that he didn't kill people that told him to kill earlier in the church.
Was that happening earlier?
That was happening
in the
before they left on the ship, because he's like, you need to go over there and slit that person's throat. And Brother's like, I'm not going to do that.
I thought that was after.
It was before.
But this is a pretty strong instance of him just directly defying
Sure, yeah.
We see
he defies his god. How could he do such a
friction.
thing?
Yeah, there's friction that builds between and Brother throughout, but kind of bullies Brother into doing stuff and is kind of steering him. And this is one instance where Brother just full on resists. Mm-hmm. And nope, doesn't matter. It's the right thing to do is to carry him back to Omnia. And Ohm's like, no, just leave him to die.
Yeah.
I think that's a pivotal character change moment that we see. So with the way Brother treats Vorbis, I think there's room to interpret it, especially in the beginning, as him just being naive. But I think that later on there's room to see it as him having a deeper set of morals that he adheres to even when it's inconvenient. Do you see both? Do you see one more than the other?
I think in that capacity, Brother's unchanged, because in the whole time he has the core sets of beliefs, which are the moral philosophies inside of the Omian religion, and he's a continual adherent to those.
So for you, would you say you see naivety in Brother in the beginning?
Naivety in that he's unknowledgeable about the way the world works, sure.
And what about with his interactions with Vorbis?
I don't see the connection between naivety and his interaction with Vorbis.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't really...
You didn't see that as much.
I didn't really get these connections.
Fair. That is fair. So, let's move on. Along with that situation where he decides to trek across the desert with... Along with that situation on the desert beach when they wash up and Brother decides to carry Vorbis with screaming at him, we see Brother's sense of identity begin to change as the novel, brings him along its plot. And he seems to develop a sense of identity increasingly separate from the Omnian dogma and the turtle. He develops his own sense of what's right and what he's going to do, almost in defiance of the things around him. He didn't question them before, but the pressure cooker situation of the novel seems to push him more. Would you kind of say you saw that as well?
I think he is becoming more nuanced in his interactions, but it seems like his grandmother's rearing is still present in all of his thought processes and mentalities. But he hasn't had to make difficult decisions before because he's been sheltered by his grandmother who assuredly beat him in the morning because he would do something bad throughout the day.
Yeah, I remember that. His grandmother beats him in the beginning of the day because she just knows he's going to somehow sin later on.
Right. So I don't think he changes in that capacity as a character, and I could be wrong here, but instead he just continues the same internal, almost intuitive idea of justice and what is right and what is wrong. It's just now becoming more nuanced due to the tumultuous situations that he's put into that he never interacted with before.
Okay, I'm going to read you an interaction Brother has with another character called Simony. I want you to tell me what you think. And Simony is kind of a more cynical Omnian who we encountered throughout the novel. Simony says, as he's kind of watching Brother do his thing, he says, "You're not one of us." And Brother responds to that by saying, "I don't think I'm one of them either. I'm one of mine." What do you think of that interaction? That stood out to me.
I think he's realizing that he's not a part of any group. And he's now realizing he's not a part of the Omian Church because the Omian Church, more and more as he sees the leadership, is not adhering to Ohm itself.
Do you think Pratchett's commenting here on the tensions between individuals and groups?
I didn't read that in the book at all. I saw it more as the strength of a character of doing right and wrong, and the how you would say praisable or plaudable strength of Brother as a person, and who even in his, as you would say, naivety or simplicity, is still this powerful, unique character because he is willing to adhere to what he believes is right and wrong. And he doesn't take he takes the inconvenient truth rather than the convenient lie. The inconvenient, difficult path rather than the convenient, incorrect action. And we see that again and again with how he keeps getting told by one of the leaders, "Hey, forget that you saw that." And he's like, how could I forget that? What are you talking about? He can't understand it because he remembers everything, and it's just wrong to lie. Or when he doesn't let Vorbis, he doesn't strand Vorbis and let Vorbis die because it's just wrong to do.
Even if it's inconvenient. And
if it's inconvenient.
That ends up being very inconvenient for him later.
And I think we, as the reader, get to enjoy that because we are constantly caught in tumultuous situations where do you take the inconvenient, more difficult route that is more honest or perhaps more righteous? Or do you take the convenient lie or convenient shortcut? And we interact with that as humans so many times.
That makes me think that one of the things that Pratchett is kind of doing here in a lot of the situations that Brother finds himself in is that this, through Brother, Pratchett is kind of acting out a particular response to the trolley problem. So, for example, when they wash up on the beach, Vorbis is unconscious. It's a desert beach. There's no one around. Brother could walk away, and through inaction, this extremely malevolent, malicious, conniving person would just conveniently disappear. And Ohm even tells him to do that. And it's kind of a trolley problem setup where, would you save a cart full of people hurtling down the road, the trolley, by pulling this switch or pushing this person in front of it? That seems the situation that's kind of set up there. And Brother has a particular response to it.
Yeah, and I think that's something that people can appreciate in reading about this hero of the story taking the inconvenient route.
And he gets situations like that all the time where Vorbis especially is trying to force him to choose between one evil or another, trying to compromise him or trying to erode his morals. And Brother continuously finds ways to, resist that or find another solution, and to the ultimate frustration of people around him.
Right.
So yeah, that's one thing I really appreciated. So back to the individual versus group tension that I saw was in a sense of identity. So Brother's identity, and you tell me what you think. Brother's identity to me seemed to be very little to do with his own thoughts and thinking for himself. In the beginning of the novel, he was the product of his grandmother and his job as an acolyte and the Omnian scriptures, all of which he was very sincere about adhering to, and with his photographic memory flowed through those roles unthinkingly. And those get challenged over and over again. And those are identities that are crafted for him and handed to him. You are the product of your grandmother. You are an Omnian. You are an acolyte. These are these labels that he gets to participate in that are just on a platter handed to him. Here's what you do. Here's what you think. And then, like in that interaction with Simony, for me, it was him coming to terms with, well, no, I actually don't want to be a part of that particular group identity, and him being separated from that, at least in his own mind.
Yeah, I could see that reading of it.
You don't disagree?
I mean, I didn't necessarily see it that way, but I can see reading it that way, yeah.
I was hoping you would disagree so we could have something to argue about. We're just not doing enough arguing on this podcast.
I don't know why you are constantly wanting to argue.
It's for the listeners.
Oh, okay. The 29 listens that we have.
You know, one day it's going to be thousands.
It's true.
All right, you ready to keep going?
Yeah. I didn't have anything.
Okay.
On that.
Would you like to bring us to our next topic here, or would you like me to?
So in discussing Brother and Vorbis, throughout the book we see descriptions of Brother and Vorbis's appearances, and they seem to clash with the expectations of their stations and personalities. How is it a clash with the expectation of their station? Because like Vorbis is short and skinny, but I don't see how him being the head of the Quisition is a clash with that. Okay, so in speaking of Brother and Vorbis, we can see that descriptions of their appearances seem to clash with the expectations of their station and personalities, which I disagree with, but that's fine. Quote, a short lifetime of being laughed at for having a body like a barrel and feet that gave the impression that they were about to set out in opposite directions had given him a strong tendency to think very carefully about anything he said, end quote. In contrast, we read about Vorbis being very thin and frail, and almost always disturbingly calm and collected, despite being in charge of rooting out heresy with torture, death, and plotting. Why, Leo, do you think the author chose to do this?
I think Pratchett is doing a very nice job here of showing and not telling. Mm-hmm. And, you know, part of it with Vorbis may be he's compensating for being so thin and frail. Part of it may be Pratchett just wants to create a visual contrast here with this very frail man who is wielding a lot of institutional power. Or another contrast would be just that Vorbis is almost always completely calm. Like just very much in control of the way he's expressing himself and coming off very calm, while at the same time he's in charge of a lot of death and cunning and plotting and torture. Brother, on the other hand, you know, you read that description of him being laughed at for having a body like a barrel and his funny feet. But what he's really going to end up being is the eighth prophet of the religion. He's going to end up being a major figure in the religion, and he looks goofy, but underneath that goofiness is an intelligence. He doesn't look intelligent, but he is highly intelligent in his own way. So for me, that's the contrast there. I think you maybe see it a little bit differently, but for me, those contrasts are just interesting juxtapositions.
It's fair. I guess when I was reading Vorbis's appearances, I didn't necessarily think about it as a contrast to his positioning. I thought about it as iconic, really.
Interesting.
Because I guess when I picture certain villains, I can see the thin, evil man being a torturer. I can see the power play by these people. I think like in the little cartoon Aladdin, right? The evil character is like this super thin, evil-looking man. I guess that's what I pictured in my head. And I forget that villain's name in Aladdin. But
well, we don't need to talk about Aladdin.
Oh, okay.
Well, we can.
No, we don't have to. I'm just saying I didn't I didn't have that. Maybe you're diving deeper for deeper meaning here.
That's what I was going to say. I might be going a little bit more into it than the text justifies, which I do sometimes.
And I thought Brother's appearance and physical descriptors were not necessarily showing a contrast or opposing to Vorbis, but rather adding to the value of this bumbling man that doesn't necessarily show off a strong personality to other people on the outside, despite his, really complex interior. His simplistic exterior gives off this how do you say, writing off of other people about him.
So you're saying that you did not see a contrast with Brother's physical appearance and his inner intelligence and depth, or that you didn't necessarily...
I didn't see that Vorbis and Brother's appearances are to be a contrast to us look at the interior personalities of these characters.
Okay. So you kind of see the interesting relations between their physical appearances and their personalities and interior landscapes. Mm-hmm. What you're not seeing is this Pratchett
dichotomy in between those two characters.
Pratchett purposely setting up their appearances to kind of be something for us to compare and contrast.
Yeah. I mean, I also think we can look at true villains like Heimlich Himmler, who is like 135 pounds and was constantly sickly and was a frail, thin man. But he was reported to have an extremely calm appearance, despite all the death and torture that he was related to and the orders that he gave. And so I guess in my head, I sometimes see thin, frail men as being more villainous looking than, say, a large, brooding man that would be Brother's physical appearance.
Interesting. Okay.
But, that could just be, when I was reading it, that was the casting in my, theater in my mind.
For me, there was just something about their appearances and the way they were brought up and how they were placed in the text that stood out to me.
I think that's one of the great things about reading these types of authors is there's so many icons that you can latch onto and give meaning to. I think when we talked about The Old Man and the Sea, that's also another beautiful one where Hemingway gives so many small icons that you can easily latch onto to connect to. And he gives a lot of great physical descriptors.
Just zooming out a little bit more, that's one of the great things about reading a book and then discussing it is you almost get a whole nother book out of it. If you have a book, especially if you really like the book and you want more content related to the book, just go have a discussion with your friends about it. Because that's what I love so much about what we do is I love reading. I do it all the time. And the fact that I get to talk to you and our friends about it, about the stuff we're reading is just, I don't know how I get to be that lucky. And one of the best parts about it is I get to see different takes on it, different interpretations, and even where we disagree or go completely different directions on it, that's still fascinating to me.
Yeah, I'd love when we disagree in book club because then we get to have a different perspective.
Right, and that's what it's all about, learning different perspectives, getting to enjoy the variety of perspectives that are out there. Okay, let's take a look at another area I wanted to talk about. As Vorbis executes his plot to take over Ephebe, Brother asks him about what really happened to another character named Brother Murdoch. Brother Murdoch was supposed to have a wrongful death at the hands of the Ephebians, and that was supposed to be the cause for Omnia, justifiably retaliating against them. It was supposed to be the casus belli that Vorbis wanted. Vorbis tells him that there are trivial truths that seem true from the outside, and that there are deeper truths that sometimes have to be hidden in a labyrinth of lies.
So to give some context for the reader so they don't feel lost, Brother Murdoch was sent on a diplomatic mission to Ephebe before the timeline of this book. And it is said to Brother and the other church officials that he was killed at Ephebes during the diplomatic mission. And now that's the, like Leo said, causa belli, for them declaring war. How could you kill our innocent diplomat? And later in the book, it is hinted at, although never explicitly stated, that Brother Murdoch was actually killed by Vorbis, or by the order of Vorbis, and then said that it was the Ephebes that killed him.
And that's when Brother confronts him on that. That's when Vorbis is like, well, there's superficial truths and then there's deeper truths that have to be protected with lies.
And the lie there is that they say Ephebes killed him, and Brother talks to there's no leader of the Ephebes because they're a anarchistic democracy. So they don't have a leader.
They have a tyrant, but they have also a democratic system as well, something like that.
Yeah. So he's like, oh, we never killed him. We sent him away. I'm pretty sure, your guy killed him. And then when confronted by it, you gotta hide the real truth behind the lie.
And the real truth there being that, well, it's important that we take over this city because we're spreading our religion. And it's important that we have a good justification for it.
And I believe Vorbis says the Ephebes did kill Brother Murdoch because they didn't accept his diplomatic proposal.
Right. He does some mental gymnastics there to get his point. So what do you think of Vorbis's argument there? Do you think it's important to protect deeper truths and the ways, you want the world to be, with maybe half-truths and white lies?
I think it's important to lie sometimes when it protects higher truths. Sure, sometimes you gotta lie.
So, like with a white lie. So if someone says, hey, I just got this new dress, new accessory, new whatever, and they're excited about it, and they ask you what you think about it. Or, if your kid comes up to you and is like, hey, I made this drawing here. You're like, yep, looks great. You might be telling a white lie to somebody. You think that's okay?
In different contexts, sure.
Because the truth you are protecting there is that, that person's feelings are important and you want them to
right, but I wouldn't lie about someone's appearance. Like if they asked me, I would tell them the ugly truth of, no, that dress looks bad or that accessory looks awful, but you should do what makes you happy.
But in general, you're good with white lies.
Sure, like if I'm asked, oh, would you love me if I was a worm? And the truth is like, I don't love any worm. But of course I'm going to tell that person, yeah, I'd love you if you were a worm.
Who's asking if you're a worm?
Who do you think?
Okay, your wife. Got it.
So in that case, yeah, of course I'm going to. Whether it's a lie or not, doesn't matter. I am usually more prone to be willing to lie if the question is related to a event or situation that could never be reality.
And so in essence, you agree with the argument that, there's not necessarily a contradiction between having a deeper, more meaningful truth to pursue and not get hung up in superficial words.
I guess so, yeah. And the other thing is there's times where I think lying helps protect the deeper truth, or is perhaps easier to make it convenient. And the easy example for me is if I'm at home and my wife asks, do you want salmon for dinner? And the truth is, no, I don't want salmon for dinner. But the much longer answer that I'm going to avoid by just saying yes is, no, I don't feel like salmon for dinner. What I feel like is shrimp, but we don't have shrimp, and I'm not willing to go to the store. That leaves us these set of options. And although maybe I'd prefer chicken, I'm perfectly happy since you already have the salmon out and it's already thawed. So let's just utilize that. So instead of saying this long-winded thing, which I could make longer or shorter, depending on the essence of the feeling, I'm willing to say the short yes lie to avoid a long true paragraph. Does that make sense?
That makes sense. And in that instance, is what you're doing even lying? Like at a narrow interpretation, you saying yes to that question could technically be construed as a lie if at a narrow interpretation, but a broader interpretation of what you're saying, is it lying?
In the same way, is Vorbis lying when he says the Ephebes killed Brother Murdoch by refusing the negotiation?
See, I would think in that instance, Vorbis is just taking a little too broad view of the situation, or maybe too liberal of a definition of what's true there. But in the instance that you gave, the example you gave, which is a great example of situations we bump into all day long, and you kind of say what you mean rather than literally spelling out something for the ease of the flow of a conversation or a situation. And it happens all the time. Like, we get what each other means, even if we're not speaking technically, precisely truth. Again, narrow definition versus a broader definition.
Sure.
Okay. Interesting.
What do you think?
I think that where I was going to go with this is, I think it's interesting to see Brother respond to instances like this, situations like this, where he just does not go with the social flow because it's just not right. Like, he sees it a little bit more black and white, and that is inconvenient for Vorbis, especially Vorbis, because Vorbis is nothing but, standing on shifting sands when it comes to creating the truth around him. And Brother tries very hard to hold on to objectivity and his sense of what's right. So it's very interesting to see the two interact together, because what's the example? You gave a good example earlier of the way Brother handles situations like this. So someone did something in Brother's presence that needs to be secret, or is, like a, hey, hush, hush situation. And he tells Brother, forget you saw that. And Brother does not understand that at a literal level or figurative level. On the literal level, he is incapable of forgetting something. And on the figurative level, it does not occur to him to be dishonest about something that he saw. Like, why would he? So two layers there that Pratchett's working on, but that's an example of what Brother does in those situations. And same thing in real life. There's times when, like, you're doing something that's technically wrong, or you don't need to be explicitly explaining something, and you're not really doing something wrong, but that just eases the social flow.
Like when a kid doesn't understand when their parents do this weird social dance.
Right.
For example, like they open a gift, like parents go over to Christmas and they open a gift, and then they're like, oh, wow, thank you so much. And then the kid blurts out, but Mom, I know that you hate the color blue. And they don't understand the deeper social dance of showing appreciation for something.
Right.
Despite what the kid sees as objective truth.
Right.
And Brother, in this case, does not see that social dance. He is, like you said earlier, a bit of an outcast, where that doesn't wash over him to do these fake social dances.
Yeah. And I really like that, Pratchett puts these two characters together like that. And I think this brings up another good question of, is it even possible for large, ambitious organizations like the Omnian Church to function without protecting deeper truths with layers of lies, or kind of, if you want to put it in a more softer perspective, of managing perspectives and managing spin and marketing? Is that even possible, do you think, for an organization to be wholly, bluntly truthful without managing spin or perspective or marketing? Because think of something like the Catholic Church. It's on every continent where there's civilization. It's a gigantic organization. It's an ancient organization. And you can see where they put effort into managing how they appear to people and managing how their organization is perceived by people. Can an organization that large and sprawling do otherwise? Can it do without marketing itself in that way?
Without marketing? I think you could market yourself without lying. Maybe it's harder in this day and age because everything is pushed to the extreme, whereas perhaps earlier we could be more nuanced to say, oh, my product is good, you can have it. Nowadays, it's like you have to be like, my product is the best product ever and nothing else can ever compare. And I think that's been pushed with our social media culture, with our, connection to information culture. So people are more likely to latch on to a shortened, simple, extreme opinion rather than a nuanced, long-winded, moderate opinion. And that's what the algorithm pushes for us.
Now, what about governments?
Do
governments have to have secrets?
Yeah. Militaries have to have secrets, right? Because if the other military has all your secrets, then you are not going to win. Oftentimes, in many different battles or wars, the battle for information supersedes the battlefield battle.
Right. Like the the extent to which code breakers affected the outcomes of different battles and just whole directions that the wars took is astounding to read about.
So militaries have to have secrets. Sure, that's not hard to imagine. Do governments have to have secrets? In some capacities, governments have to have secrets because governments are related to military power. It's part of the whole reason of a governance is to have a national security or a bordered security.
But why are they hiding the UFOs? Why do they have to hide the UFOs from us?
I think some people say widespread panic.
Is that a truth, whether or not there's UFOs? But are there truths that are inherently dangerous? I think as another theme that's kind of brought up in the novel that is interesting to talk about is, are there truths out there that in and of themselves are dangerous? For example, within the novel, Vorbis might say, when he learns of Ohm's manifestation as a tortoise, he might say, that's inconvenient for the religion. We are going to explain this a different way or cover this up. And that is a truth that is dangerous. Do you think there's truths that are dangerous, or are they not so much dangerous as really just inconveniences for the secret holder? Interesting question, right?
I think there's truths that are dangerous, sure. Like, where are the nuclear sites? It's a dangerous truth.
True. That's a good point. I'm trying to think of a non-military example.
I think the extreme examples are much easier. Like in a movie, like, oh, this character is in love with his best friend's wife. And that's a dangerous truth that he should keep to himself.
That's a good point. You don't need to explicitly talk about all the thoughts that pass through your mind.
Right.
They don't need to be outside thoughts.
Yeah, sometimes. But you're not lying in the capacity of like whatever Hallmark movie where this character could, instead of ruining his best friend's marriage just because he likes the wife, he could keep it to himself. And that's not lying if he just doesn't say it out loud.
Yeah, but then you wouldn't have the Hallmark movie, right?
Oh, gosh. How many Hallmark movies have passed through meaningless TV program?
Well, good thing we are reading books and not watching made-for-TV dramatic movies. Anything else we want to talk about here with truths and lies and Vorbis's worldview and Brother's worldview?
No, I mean, there's a lot here, and I think Pratchett does a good job of laying everything out, and I really appreciate that Pratchett doesn't give you his opinion directly. He more so sets up situations so that you can see how the characters interact in that situation, and we can philosophize or wonder about those. And that's really fun. It's almost like I'd relate it to a neutral production of a Dungeons and Dragons event or room or campaign where you have a display of events and data, and instead of there being like a right and wrong, there's just a nuanced interaction that you can dissect.
Right. The way I like to look at it, or what I say about, how things are presented in this book, I appreciate that Pratchett he shows us rather than tells us. And there's art in that, and I appreciate that quite a bit. So I think that is a good place to stop for today. That's a good high note for us to stop on, and we will pick this up next week. We look forward to chatting with you guys then. We appreciate you listening. This has been the Deep Dive Book Club podcast. And Joel, you want to remind us where they can reach out to us?
They can reach out to us on Instagram at Deep Dive Book Club, or they can send us an email at deepdivebookclub@gmail.com.
And we look forward to hearing from you. We want your comments. Tell us where we're wrong. Tell us where you agree with us. Send complaints to Joel. And we will see you guys next episode.
See y'all next episode.